everybody. Aaron Keller here with the Daily Debrief. For those of you watching on the Law&Crime Network, we are here early today so that the network can continue live coverage of the murder trial of Amber Guyger into the evening. Guyger, of course, is the Dallas police officer accused of shooting and killing Botham Jean. Guyger went home, opened the door, saw the victim, and opened fire thinking he was an intruder. She was in the wrong apartment. There are 4 alternates on top of the standard group of 12 jurors hearing the case. 12 members of this pool are women, 4 are men, 7 members of that pool are black. Watching this case along with us are attorneys Janine Atamian and Linda Kenny Bodden here in New York. Also, our guest watching from afar, attorney Ashley McMahon, is watching along with us, and forensic psychologist Dr. John Huber are here all along with me. Live testimony will continue at any possible moment in this case. Meanwhile, before that happens, let's get you caught up to speed on some critical moments. Here is the defendant's 911 call.
Get up, man.
Dallas 911, this is Carla. Where's your emergency?
Hi, this is an off-duty officer. I need EMS. I'm in number.
What's going on?
I'm an off-duty officer. I thought it was in my apartment, and I shot a guy thinking it was my apartment.
You shot someone?
Yes, I thought it was my apartment. Oh my God, I'm sorry.
Okay, and where are you at right now?
I'm inside the apartment with him. Hey, come on.
What's your name?
I'm Amber Guyger. I need to get me. I'm in.
Okay, we have help on the way.
I know, but I'm gonna lose my job. I thought it was my apartment. I need a supervisor. Hey, bud. Hey, bud. Hey, bud. I thought it was my apartment. I could have sworn I parked on the 3rd floor.
Okay, I understand.
I thought it was my apartment.
Okay, and what floor are you in right now?
The 4th floor. Hey, bud. They're coming, bud. I'm sorry, man.
Okay, where was he shot?
He's on the top left. Oh my God, I'm done. I didn't mean to. I'm so sorry. Stay with me, bud. She's tired. Hurry. Over here.
Okay, go ahead and talk to him.
No, it's me. I'm off duty. I thought they were in my apartment. I thought this was my floor.
Amber Guyger's partner on the Dallas police force admitted that the two shared a romantic relationship as well, which included sharing provocative photos. That was his word. She was texting him while she was on the phone with 911 instead of caring for the victim.
She sends you a Snapchat that also includes a text portion of it that says "want to touch." Is that accurate?
Yes.
At 9:33, she indicates to you that she's barely walking out. That's when she's leaving the police station. Is that correct?
Yes.
When Ms. Guyger writes to you at 10:02:25, she says, "I need you, hurry." Does that kind of convey to you that she's already expecting you to be going towards her?
No. I interpret it as there was an emergency going on.
And then at 10:03, she writes to you, "I fucked up." Is that correct?
Yes.
Did you later come to realize that these text messages had been sent to you while she was on the phone with 911?
No, I didn't know that.
Should you be giving 100% of your attention to the person who's dying in front of you, if you can?
Yes, you should.
Should you be sending text messages?
No.
A fellow Dallas police officer explained the department's general orders and training. Those orders and training documents state that the defendant should have taken cover and waited for additional units when responding to a burglary in progress. In other words, her training was not to open fire.
For safety, officer safety, you would need an additional officer for yourself.
Primarily for whose safety?
Myself and the person inside, if possible.
And if you have, say you got there and there's an open door, and you've opened up the door or you've looked inside and then you come to realize there's somebody inside that particular location, I want you to presume that you can safely, tactically reposition to a position of cover and concealment, or you can just shoot them dead and then figure it out later. What do you do?
You cover and concealment.
Is that because of the sanctity of human life?
Yes, sir.
Let's go back now and listen to the very first witness in this case, the victim's sister.
We grew up in St. Lucia. It's a Caribbean island. Growing up, both of them was always very active. I would say he was a little adventurous. When he started high school, he started a choir. At the high school, he also started song leading at our church, Church of Christ, and he fell in love with music. He even wrote songs, church songs. We found 4 songs that he wrote, all about Christ and wanting to get to heaven. Honestly, I don't think I've accepted it as yet. I think it will still take time. Sometimes I have still called his number because he's still in my favorites on my phone. So I've called sometimes just to see if he will answer.
That set the tone for what came after in testimony. Let's listen to the panel now, jump in with some discussion. Linda Kenny-Bodden here with Janine Atamian. Linda, it's just horribly sad. You got a victim with a bright smile, relatives describing him as the guy everybody wishes they could meet, and then listen to the way the defendant is describing things in that 911 call. Was she worried about him? Was she worried about herself? Was she worried about both? Was she worried about herself way more than she was worried about him?
Well, she did make a 911 call, so that's good. But she said, look, I could lose my job. That's usually not the first thing you should be thinking of when you have somebody bleeding, dying on the apartment that you thought was yours and you just killed him.
Janine Atamian, is this defense theory that she just was completely unaware of where she was, that all the surroundings looked similar? This place is like a labyrinth of all these meandering mazes of hallways and corridors, and she didn't realize she was on the wrong floor. Is that even believable?
No, not for me. I mean, I think there was the red rug outside, there were numbers on the door. It just doesn't make sense. I mean, it really just doesn't make sense.
Linda, then what happened here? I mean, surely the state isn't saying that she plotted this out to basically bust into the wrong apartment and pull the trigger for some reason. So where does it sit legally?
No, she didn't. But legally, in murder in Texas can be intentional or knowingly, that you knowingly did an act. The act would be, I picked up a gun, I shot it at your direction, knowing that if you do that, you could kill somebody or cause serious bodily injury resulting in death. And I think the state, once the jury gets those charges, I think the jury's going to find that.
In other words, without justification, because one of the things I sort of expected to come up here was justification. She believed that it was an intruder in her own apartment. Texas law is a little bit different than many other jurisdictions where you can use deadly force to defend property. Most states you can't do that because human life is presumed legally to be more important than property. In Texas, I guess they sort of settle out at about the same area.
But it's still an affirmative defense. She's still going to have to prove it, that she had that fear or that she was doing something of protection that she reasonably believed necessary, and that may or may not exist.
Janine, the 911 call might actually support that theory, though. She starts in right away before she has a lot of time for forethought or reflection, presumably saying, I thought that he was in my apartment.
Well, it supports it to some degree, but then we have the testimony from the other officers where she's an officer, she's trained, she should have stepped outside the apartment, taken cover, and radioed or called for backup, and she didn't.
She didn't do that here. Let's move on to talk with some of our guests who are watching remotely. Ashley McMahon is a criminal defense attorney. Ashley, what do you make of this? Is this justified? Is it not? Is it a mistake? Is it murder?
I have to agree with Linda on this. I think the jury can come back and find her guilty based on, I mean, look, she's sending Snapchats and text messages to her partner trying to, cover her trail basically and figure out how to wrap this up. That it doesn't look good. Plus, on the 911 call, the first thing that she is concerned about is whether or not she's going to lose her job. And she repeats it multiple times. To a jury, that is going to come off as unbelievably callous, in my opinion. I mean, this victim was an American success story, shot down in his own apartment. These facts are not good. And the fact that she's a trained police officer that really should be held to a higher standard. And I think the jury probably is going to hold her to a higher standard than we would anybody else. And the fact that she didn't do what she was supposed to do here or what was, regular code of conduct, I think it's going to speak volumes.
Dr. John Huber is a forensic psychologist watching along with us as well. So, Dr. Huber, looking at this case through the lens of your discipline, what jumps out to you?
Well, I think all of what you said is possible. I'm kind of a contrarian here, obviously, but the first thing she did said is, I need an EMS now. And then she went off onto, it was a mistake. I didn't realize it was in the right apartment or wrong apartment. I'm going to lose my job. And human beings, training or not, until you actually have that threat in front of you and have to pull your weapon in your mind, you don't know what you're going to do and how you're going to react. It doesn't matter how much training you've done until you pull that trigger. And, you know, I've worked enough cases with enough people, even military, who've had to shoot overseas, and then they come back and they're in their own living room, and it's a total different scenario there. And so for a moment, she was there.
Is it possible, and again, this is possible, is it possible, in your opinion, then, that this is somehow excusable?
Well, you know, I don't want to say she shouldn't have any kind of consequences, you know, and again, you said that earlier with Texas law, and it's not just property, it's your home. You can use lethal force to defend your home. It's not just any property. The whole idea then is your family's there and everything else. So she felt at that moment she was in her home, she fired the weapon, and then reality hit. And at that point, I think she just panicked and just started scrambling for anything she could.
Dr. Huber, anything you can read into that 911 call? Was she more concerned for herself, the victim? What does your training tell you?
I think she was in shock. I really don't think that if anybody asked her any straightforward questions at that moment that you were going to get a clear answer any way, shape, or form. And she was grasping at straws. You know, again, the first thing she said was, I need an EMS. And I shot a man upper right side. And, he was still alive. She was trying to talk to him at the same time while she was talking to the EMS. Hold on, honey, you know. And so there was compassion there. I don't know which way the jury's going to go on this. And it's hard to predict. But if they start looking at mitigating things, which at this point they're just trying to determine whether she's guilty or not, she's using an affirmative defense. So mitigation can be important at this time. And that's where, you know, someone like myself could talk about how they've dealt with other people who've had first-time experiences where they've had to fire or they felt like they had to fire, and how they reacted differently than they ever expected that they would.
Live testimony set to resume any moment in the Amber Guyger trial in Texas. We will take a break here on the Debrief and come back in just a moment. Welcome back to the Debrief. If you are watching live on the Law&Crime Network, testimony is scheduled to resume any moment in the trial of Amber Guyger. She, of course, is the Dallas police officer accused of shooting and killing Botham Jean. Guyger went home, opened the door, saw the victim, and opened fire thinking he was an intruder. She was in the wrong apartment. She realized it and mentioned it on 911. I want to jump now ahead to listen to some of the state's opening statements in this case.
Botham Jean. By all accounts, Bo was a wonderful, decent, kind man. On September the 6th of 2018, Bo was 26 years old, and he was sitting inside his apartment in shorts and a t-shirt, watching TV, eating a bowl of vanilla ice cream. When all of a sudden, Amber Guyger comes through his front door, uninvited. As Bo is trying to get up off the couch to find out what this intruder is doing coming into his home, she is leveling off her gun, having acquired her target, and she shoots at him twice. No opportunity for de-escalation.
Those are some of the state's opening statements. The judge standing above the bench right now as we speak, issuing a ruling on what exactly she is going to allow into this case pursuant to the motion we just heard before the break. Looks like the judge is bringing the jury back in. She did say that they were going to continue playing the video. Presumably, at least some of what we saw before the break is going to make it in front of the jury. Let's go back into court.
Really chilly in here today. Tomorrow, you might wish for some of this air conditioning. I never know what we're going to get. Although this is the first time my air conditioning has worked 2 days in a row this summer. So maybe you all have brought us good luck in that regard. All right, Mr. Hermes.
Can I proceed, Judge?
Yes, please.
I'll pass the witness.
No questions.
May she be excused?
No objection.
Subject to recall.
All right, thank you very much, Sergeant Valentine. Please make yourself available should the attorney.
We're taking some time to get traction in the trial of Amber Guyger. I want to jump in with some analysis now. Linda Kenny-Bodden, Janina Tamian are here in the studio with me in New York. So, Linda, there was all this discussion before the lunch break, which lasted about 20 minutes longer than we thought it would, about whether or not the jury was going to see some dash cam video, some squad car video, some surveillance video, which suggests that there was special treatment, which suggests that the police department, the union, basically got in the middle of things early in the investigation. What did the union, what did the police superiors discuss with the defendant? Big question marks as to that right now.
Yeah, absolutely, but the judge said she was going to continue to play the video, which is about 5 minutes and 41 seconds, but then the witness is being excused. So, Aaron, I'm not quite sure what she did, because I'm not quite sure whether or not it belonged here at this point in this location of the case.
Oh, maybe we'll see that witness being recalled. That could be a possibility here. Let's listen back in. We've got another witness on the stand.
Barnett, R-Y-A-N-B-A-R-N-E-T-T.
And you're obviously with the Dallas Police Department, correct?
Yes.
How long have you been a Dallas police officer?
A little over 7 years.
Okay, and can you tell the jury how you're assigned within the department?
I work in a patrol capacity, and I respond to calls. At the time, I was a bicycle officer.
Back on September the 6th of 2018?
Yes.
Okay, and let's just get right to that point. On September the 6th, 2018, did you go to a call at the Southside Flats?
Yes.
And were you wearing a body-worn camera that particular evening?
Yes.
Okay, the jury's already seen the body-worn cameras coming into the department or to the apartment from two different perspectives, so I'm just going to use a still from them. May I approach the witness, Your Honor?
Yes.
I'm going to show you what's marked for identification. This states exhibit number 309. And I had indicated to you earlier, and I showed you your body-worn camera. The State's Exhibit 309 fairly and accurately depict the image of the ottoman and the bowl of food in the condition that it existed at the time you were there.
Yes.
All right. Any additions, deletions, modifications to that?
No.
I offer State's Exhibit 309.
No objection.
It's admitted.
Your Honor, for purposes of the record, this is going to be 7 minutes and 58 seconds into Officer Barnett's body-worn camera. May I publish?
Yes.
All right. Again, do you recall what food was in that bowl, Officer Barnett?
I did not look at the food at the time. No.
Does it appear to be still frozen vanilla ice cream?
Yes, it appears to be.
I'll pass the witness.
Judge, I have no questions for Officer Barnett, but I'd like him subject to recall.
Okay. Officer Barnett, you may be excused for today, but you may be recalled by one of the attorneys.
Again, waiting for things to take traction with a new witness there. Well, wrapping up very quickly here in the Amber Guyger case. Want to mention the judge's ruling. The judge basically said that more of this video that we were talking about before the break, for those of you watching on the network, could be played. It showed Amber Guyger being allowed to basically walk about, to sit in the front seat of a squad car rather than in the back seat, being allowed to speak with others on the scene, a union rep, whatnot. A lot of questions outside the presence of the jury as to whether or not an average suspect would be allowed to do those things. The answer, of course, is no. The judge saying that more of this recording could be played, but that the judge would not allow questioning as to whether or not there are irregularities compared with standard police investigations. So Linda Kenny-Bodden, what's going on behind the scenes with this? Because it just doesn't sound good that there may have been a favoritist treatment of this particular defendant, but questions as to whether or not it's legally relevant, questions as to whether or not privileges attach to a union rep, discussion with someone who's about to be a defendant, things like that. We're going to talk about that in a moment, but first we've got, actually we can talk about it now. So Linda, what do you make of the ruling here?
You know, we had discussed it with Janina Tamian in the segment before you came on, Aaron, with the Daily Debrief, that it really is not relevant at this time, that the objection should have been it's not relevant, that it's more prejudicial than not, because she has made no statement at this point. So she was treated favorably. She was given a hug. She was put in the patrol car. That doesn't tell you whether or not she intentionally or knowingly killed both of John.
So Janine, you're here with me now. What do you make of the judge's ruling? Is it just that it's not legally relevant to the core question as to whether or not the shooting is justifiable or otherwise excusable under the law?
Well, I think it's just really prejudicial to show it right now because, again, we haven't heard from Amber. We haven't heard that yet. And additionally, there's a lot to do right here. I mean, there's nothing that shows that these people did, in fact, influence her. So to show that video without the sound, it could be a problem.
I have other guests with me on the line right now. Attorney Ashley McMahon is with me. So, Ashley, we've been talking a lot about this video. Does it just not look good? What's your assessment of the judge's ruling?
I mean, of course it doesn't look good. You know, none of the treatment of the defendant in this case looks good to a jury. But I agree with your guest. Like, unless she's going to testify and we get into the defense case and she takes the stand, I just don't think the issue is relevant at this juncture in the trial.
Dr. John Huber, we have less than a minute left. You've been watching this from a forensic psychologist standpoint. We're really getting into the weeds with the law here, but a lot of people are going to look at the defendant's demeanor in the 911 call. She's back and forth, worrying about herself, worrying about the victim. Is that how the average juror is probably going to see this case?
You know, she's in panic mode, and it depends upon the jury, and they could see it that way. If she's just totally in panic and disorganized and doesn't know what end is up. You know, she did ask for EMS right away, and then she went into her issues, and that does look bad for her.
So much to discuss in this case. Witnesses back on the stand. For those of you watching us live on the Law and Crime Network, we're going to be dipping back into live testimony in just a second. The debrief needs to wrap up. If you're watching just the debrief, keep in mind this and other trials are live every day on the Law and Crime Network, on lawandcrime.com. The raw feeds are there for you to watch wherever you are. We will be back, for those of you watching on the Law and Crime Network, in just a moment with more coverage of the case of Amber Guyger.